I'm Genevieve, 32, and I never imagined my 5-year anniversary would end my marriage. Across the white tablecloth, Michael finally looked up from his phone and said, "Amber's pregnant. It's mine." When my tears fell, he sneered, "At least someone isn't barren." 3 years of fertility treatments, 2 miscarriages, and countless prayers had led to this moment. I sat frozen, my untouched champagne, reflecting candlelight, as my husband celebrated creating a family with another woman. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. Your support means everything as I share the most painful chapter of my story. I met Michael on a bright spring afternoon 6 years ago at a children's charity fundraiser in downtown Portland. I was volunteering as an art teacher, helping kids create colorful banners for the event, my hands stained with rainbow paints and my heart full from their laughter. He appeared in a tailored navy suit that stood out among the casual crowd, looking slightly out of place but intrigued by the cheerful chaos around him. "You've got a little blue right here," he said, gesturing to my cheek with a smile that transformed his serious face into something magnetic. "Occupational hazard," I replied, accidentally smearing more paint as I tried to wipe it away. "Here, let me," he offered gently, dabbing my face with his monogrammed handkerchief. His confidence was captivating. "I'm Michael Harrison, by the way. My law firm sponsors this event." "Genevieve Parker," I introduced myself. "I teach art at Lincoln High." His eyes lit up with genuine interest. "An artist and a teacher. 2 things I definitely am not. I can barely draw stick figures." We laughed and something clicked between us. By the end of the event, he had my number and a promise for dinner the following weekend. Our connection felt immediate and undeniable. He was 30, ambitious, with a clear trajectory toward partnership at his corporate law firm. I was 27, passionate about nurturing creativity in teenagers, often too self-conscious to express themselves. Our first date turned into a second, then a third, and soon we were spending every weekend together. I introduced him to small art galleries and outdoor concerts in the park. He took me to upscale restaurants and charity galas, where I met his colleagues. We balanced each other. His structure complemented my spontaneity, my creativity softened his pragmatism. "You make me see the world differently," he told me one night as we walked along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting on the river. "Everything was just black and white before you." 10 months after we met on a weekend trip to the coast, Michael proposed at sunset on a cliffside overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The ring was elegant but not ostentatious, a single diamond that caught the last golden rays of light. "You're the missing piece I've been searching for," he said down on one knee. "Will you marry me, Genevieve?" My heart soared as I said yes. I called my parents and 3 sisters from the car, all of them cheering so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Michael called his parents too, but the conversation was brief and formal. I noted the contrast, but didn't dwell on it. We married the following spring in a garden ceremony with 90 guests, mostly my large, boisterous family and close friends. Michael's side was noticeably smaller, just his parents and a handful of colleagues. His father, a retired military officer, maintained a rigid posture throughout the day. His mother, elegant but distant, kissed my cheek without warmth. They're just reserved, Michael explained when I mentioned it. They'll warm up once they get to know you better. Despite the coolness from his family, our wedding day was magical. We danced under string lights, cut a cake adorned with fresh flowers, and promised to build a beautiful life together. For our honeymoon, we spent 2 weeks in Italy, wandering through ancient ruins and art museums, eating gelato on sun-drenched piazzas, and getting lost in narrow cobblestone streets. In a tiny restaurant in Florence, over a bottle of Chianti, we first seriously discussed having children. "I want at least 2, I said, imagining little ones with Michael's sharp blue eyes or my unruly auburn hair. "I'd like that too," he replied, squeezing my hand. "But let's enjoy being married first. Give ourselves a couple of years before we start trying." I agreed readily. At 28, I felt I had plenty of time, and the idea of having Michael to myself for a while was appealing. When we returned home, we put a down payment on a 1920s craftsman house that needed updating, but had good bones and character. Weekends were spent stripping wallpaper, painting cabinets, and scouring flea markets for furniture we could afford. Michael's law firm salary was good, but not extravagant, especially in a city with rising housing costs. My teacher's income was modest, but I supplemented it by selling my artwork at local markets and teaching private lessons during summer breaks. Those first 2 years were mostly happy. Michael's work hours were long but predictable. We hosted dinner parties, joined a wine club, took weekend trips to the mountains or coast, and built routines that felt comforting. Sunday mornings with coffee and crosswords, Tuesday night takeout and movies, summer breaks when I could join him for lunch downtown. There were small warning signs I chose to ignore: how Michael would check his email during dinner, the way his attention drifted when I talked about my students or my latest art project, the increasing frequency of late nights at the office as he pursued partnership. When I mentioned these concerns, he always had a reasonable explanation. "This case is massive, Jenna. Once it's over, things will calm down." But one case would end and another would begin. Still, I made excuses for him because I understood ambition. I supported his dreams because that's what partners do. And I believed that once we started, our family priorities would naturally shift. How wrong I was. On our second anniversary, we decided it was time to start trying for a baby. We'd settled into our home, established our careers, and felt ready to expand our family. I remember the night we officially began trying. A romantic dinner at home, candles lit my ovulation calendar discreetly checked. The intentionality made everything feel momentous, like we were stepping into a new chapter together. "To our future," Michael toasted, clinking his wine glass against mine. "To our family," I responded, setting my glass down untouched, already committed to optimizing our chances. The first month passed with eager anticipation. I downloaded fertility tracking apps, started taking prenatal vitamins, and read everything I could find about increasing our odds. When my period arrived right on schedule, I felt a twinge of disappointment, but remained optimistic. "It often takes healthy couples up to a year," I told Michael as he held me. "We've only just started." He nodded, kissing the top of my head. "We have plenty of time." Months 2, 3, and 4 followed the same pattern. Hopeful, tracking, carefully timed intimacy, followed by the crushing arrival of my period. By month 6, sex had become mechanical, scheduled around my fertility window rather than our desire. The spontaneity that had once characterized our relationship was fading, replaced by an underlying anxiety that grew with each unsuccessful cycle. Maybe we should relax a bit, Michael suggested after I burst into tears at the sight of another negative pregnancy test. All this tracking and timing might be creating too much pressure. I tried to follow his advice, putting away the thermometer and deleting the most obsessive of my tracking apps. For a month, we attempted to recapture the carefree intimacy of our early relationship. It didn't work. The calendar dates still loomed large in my mind, and the disappointment when my period arrived was just as acute. After 9 months of trying, I scheduled an appointment with my gynecologist, Darloryn Chen. Michael was supposed to join me but canceled last minute due to a client emergency. Dr. Chen was kind but straightforward as she explained the process of fertility testing. Most couples conceive within a year, she assured me. But given that you're approaching 30 and have been trying for 9 months, it's reasonable to start some basic tests. The next few weeks involved blood work to check my hormone levels, an ultrasound to examine my ovaries, and a hysterosalpingogram to ensure my fallopian tubes weren't blocked. Michael reluctantly provided a sample for semen analysis after rescheduling twice. When we returned for results, Dr. Chen seemed puzzled. "Everything looks normal," she said, reviewing our charts. "Your hormone levels are within range, ovulation appears regular, and your tubes are clear. Michael's sperm count and motility are excellent." "So why aren't we pregnant?" I asked, the frustration evident in my voice. "Sometimes there's no clear explanation," she replied gently. "About 20% of infertility cases are classified as unexplained. The good news is that there's nothing obviously wrong. I'd recommend continuing to try naturally for a few more months while incorporating some lifestyle modifications." I left with a list of suggestions: reduce stress, maintain a healthy weight limit, caffeine and alcohol, try acupuncture. Michael and I implemented them all, though his participation became increasingly reluctant. He started finding reasons to work late during my fertility window. The scheduled intimacy that had once been awkward but determined now felt one-sided and obligatory. As we passed the 1-year mark of trying to conceive, I noticed Michael withdrawing emotionally. When I wanted to discuss next steps or potential treatments, he would change the subject or suddenly remember an urgent work email. He started spending more weekends at the office, claiming major cases demanded his attention. Then, 14 months into our journey, I missed my period. After so many disappointments, I waited 3 days before taking a test. When the second line appeared faint but unmistakable, I fell to my knees on the bathroom floor, sobbing with joy. I took 2 more tests to confirm before calling Michael at work. "I'm pregnant," I whispered when he answered, afraid saying it too loudly might somehow jinx it. There was a long pause before he responded. Wow. That's amazing, Jen. We should celebrate tonight." His reaction seemed muted, but I attributed it to shock or perhaps the formality of his workplace. That evening, he brought home flowers and champagne for me to decline, and we talked about due dates and how to announce the news. I wanted to wait until after the first trimester, given my age and how long it had taken us to conceive. Just 2 weeks later, I woke to cramping and spotting. By afternoon, the bleeding had increased, and I knew in my heart what was happening. Michael drove me to the emergency room in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. I was having a miscarriage. "It's very common," she said kindly. "About 20% of known pregnancies end in miscarriage, and the actual number is likely higher since many occur before women realize they're pregnant." Her words, meant to comfort, did nothing to ease the hollow ache in my chest. I had only known about the baby for 2 weeks, but in that time, I had already imagined an entire future. Nursery colors, tiny hands' first steps. Michael was supportive but distant during my physical recovery. He brought me tea and made sure I took my medication, but he avoided conversations about our loss or trying again. When I tried to express my grief, he would nod sympathetically before finding a reason to step away. "Maybe we weren't meant to be parents," he said one evening about a month after the miscarriage. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, the television providing background noise neither of us was watching. "What do you mean?" I asked, stunned by his comment. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Just that maybe we should accept that this might not happen for us and focus on other aspects of our lives. Your art, my career, travel." "I'm not ready to give up," I said firmly. Lots of couples have a miscarriage and go on to have healthy pregnancies. Michael didn't argue, but I could feel his withdrawal growing. When I suggested returning to Dr. Chen to discuss next steps, he sighed heavily. "Can we just take a break from all this baby stuff? It's consuming our lives." Reluctantly, I agreed to a 3-month pause. During that time, I threw myself into my teaching and art as therapy. I started a series of abstract paintings exploring grief and hope, using my classroom after hours as a studio, since we'd converted our home's spare bedroom into an office for Michael rather than the nursery I'd secretly hoped for. When we resumed trying 6 months after the miscarriage, things had changed between us. The shared goal that had once united us now seemed to highlight our differences. Michael's work hours grew longer. Our intimate life became increasingly sporadic, no longer even aligned with my fertility windows. When I brought up fertility treatments like IUI or IVF, Michael immediately shot down the idea. "We can't afford that right now," he insisted, though his recent promotion had come with a substantial raise. "And the success rates don't justify the cost." When I suggested adoption as an alternative, he was equally dismissive. "That's even more expensive, Jen, and there's so much uncertainty involved." 8 months after resuming our attempts, I discovered I was pregnant again. My joy was tempered by anxiety this time, fear of another loss shadowing the excitement. Michael's reaction was even more subdued, than before a quick hug and a distracted, "That's great news," before returning to his laptop. This pregnancy progressed further than the first. I made it to 10 weeks, long enough to see a flickering heartbeat on an ultrasound screen, long enough to allow myself cautious hope. Then, during a routine follow-up appointment, Chen's face grew serious as she moved the ultrasound wand over my abdomen. "I'm not finding a heartbeat," she said softly. The next few days passed in a blur of medical procedures and physical pain that still paled in comparison to the emotional devastation. Michael was in Chicago for a conference when it happened. He offered to return early, but his tone suggested he hoped I would tell him to stay. "I'll be fine," I assured him, though I was anything but. "My sister can take me to the appointment. Natalie, my older sister by 2 years, and the person who knew me best in the world, held my hand through the D&C procedure and stayed with me that night. When she asked where Michael was, I made excuses about important clients and unmissable meetings. "He should be here, Jen," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "This is his loss, too. He grieves differently." I replied, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. After the second miscarriage, I found a support group for women experiencing infertility and pregnancy loss. Every Wednesday evening, I sat in a circle at the community center with women whose stories mirrored my own. Their partners seemed more involved, more devastated by their shared losses. I began to question whether Michael had ever truly wanted children or had just been going along with what he thought I wanted. When I raised this question during a rare evening when we were both home for dinner, his response was telling. Of course I want kids, Jenna, just not at any cost. Not if it's going to break us financially or emotionally. As we approached the 3-year mark of trying to build our family, I felt myself withdrawing too, protecting what remained of my battered heart. The dream of motherhood still burned within me, but the dream of creating a family with Michael was fading. I couldn't articulate it then, but something fundamental had shifted in our marriage, and it wasn't just about our inability to have a baby. Looking back, I can pinpoint when Michael began to change, though at the time, the shift was too subtle to name. It started around our 4th anniversary, small alterations in his habits and appearance that I initially attributed to his recent promotion to junior partner at the firm. The changes accumulated gradually. First came the expensive suits replacing his serviceable but unremarkable work wardrobe. Then, a new gym membership at an exclusive downtown club, resulting in more defined shoulders and arms. His usual basic haircut was upgraded to something styled at a salon that charged 3 times what he used to pay. Even his cologne changed from the one I'd given him for our first Christmas together to something woodier, more sophisticated. I told myself these changes were positive, signs of his professional success and increased confidence. Yet an uneasy feeling lingered just beneath my rationalizations. "You look nice," I commented one morning as he adjusted his new titanium watch, another recent acquisition. "Special meeting today." "Just the usual client lunch," he replied without making eye contact, a habit that had become increasingly common. Around the same time, Michael's phone became permanently attached to his hand and invariably password protected. He had never been particularly open with his device, a tendency he attributed to client confidentiality, but now he would angle the screen away when I entered the room or abruptly end calls when I approached. Our physical intimacy, already strained by years of scheduled fertility-focused encounters, dwindled to near non-existence. When I initiated, he would claim exhaustion or early meetings. The rejection stung more deeply against the backdrop of our continued failure to conceive. 8 months before our 5th anniversary, Michael's longtime secretary retired, and the firm hired Amber Collins as her replacement. I first heard her name in passing references. Amber scheduled the deposition, or Amber found a precedent for the case. Nothing noteworthy, just the normal mentions of a competent assistant. I met her at the firm's holiday party that December. Michael had been reluctant to have me attend, suggesting I might find it boring, but I insisted. Our social outings had become so rare that I was desperate for any opportunity to feel connected to his world. Amber wasn't what I expected. Based on Michael's casual mentions, I had imagined someone older, matronly, perhaps. Instead, I found myself shaking hands with a woman in her mid-20s, with sleek blonde hair, wearing a perfectly tailored black dress that highlighted a slim figure. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were assessing as she greeted me. "So nice to finally meet you," she said, her emphasis on finally carrying a subtle implication that Michael rarely mentioned me. "Michael is such an asset to the firm. We all depend on him so much." Throughout the evening, I noticed how frequently Amber appeared at Michael's side, touching his arm when she laughed at his jokes, leaning in closely to be heard over the music. When I mentioned her attentiveness on the drive home, Michael dismissed my observations. "That's her job. Jen, executive assistants are supposed to be attentive. You're being insecure." The accusation stung because perhaps there was some truth to it. 3 years of fertility struggles had eroded my confidence. I scrutinized my reflection more critically these days, noting the tired shadows beneath my eyes, the extra pounds that hormone treatments had added to my frame, the worry lines forming between my brows. 2 months after the holiday party, I borrowed Michael's phone to call mine when I couldn't locate it in our house, and a text notification appeared on his screen as I held it. "Missing you already. Dinner was perfect." The sender was listed simply as A. When I confronted him, Michael's explanation came too quickly, too smoothly. "That's Aaron from the firm. We had a business dinner with clients." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I pushed aside the doubt, ignored the lack of other texts from this Aaron when I scrolled up and accepted the explanation. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and it grew alongside the continuing changes in Michael. He began working weekends more frequently. Happy hours with colleagues extended later into the evening. Business trips multiplied. Meanwhile, his criticism of me intensified. My cooking was too basic. My clothes were too casual. My conversation topics were too centered on my classroom or art projects. The house wasn't clean enough despite my efforts to maintain it while working full-time. Nothing I did seemed to meet his increasingly exacting standards. I responded by trying harder. I lost the treatment weight and then some subsisting on salads and anxiety. I replaced my comfortable wardrobe with trendier, more feminine pieces that I couldn't really afford on my teacher's salary. I researched complex recipes and spent Sundays meal prepping to ensure dinner would be waiting when he deigned to come home. I scrubbed and organized our house to magazine-worthy perfection. None of it made a difference. The distance between us continued to grow a chasm, widening beneath the facade of our marriage. As our 5th anniversary approached, I clung to the milestone as a potential turning point. I made reservations at Castagna, an upscale restaurant far beyond our usual budget. I bought a new dress in a deep emerald that complemented my auburn hair and pale skin. I even scheduled a professional makeup application and blowout for the evening of our celebration. I made reservations for Friday. I told Michael 2 weeks before our anniversary. For our 5th. I thought Castagna would be special. He glanced up from his laptop with a flicker of something like guilt before his expression smoothed. "Right. 5th anniversary. I'll make sure to be free." That momentary hesitation should have been another warning sign, but I was too invested in my fantasy of reconnection to acknowledge it. I imagined candlelight rekindling the spark between us, meaningful conversation, rebuilding our emotional intimacy, perhaps even a return to the easy affection of our early years. Instead, I got the worst night of my life. I spent hours getting ready for our anniversary dinner, painting on the confidence I no longer felt. The emerald dress hugged my newly slender frame. My hair fell in glossy waves, and the makeup artist had skillfully concealed the strain of the past few years. Looking in the mirror, I almost recognized the woman who had once captivated Michael at a charity fundraiser. "Tonight will be different," I told my reflection. "Tonight we'll find our way back to each other." When I arrived at Castagna, the hostess informed me that my husband was already seated. I found Michael at a quiet corner table, not dressed for the occasion, but in his standard work suit, his attention fixed on his phone. He didn't look up until I slid into the chair across from him. "You look nice," he said, the compliment automatic rather than genuine. His eyes returned to his screen almost immediately. "Thank you," I replied, smoothing my napkin across my lap. "Everything okay at work?" "Just wrapping something up," he murmured, typing rapidly before finally setting the phone face down on the table. "Sorry, done now." The waiter approached with menus and a description of the evening's specials. I suggested the wine pairing with the tasting menu, hoping to make the evening feel like a true celebration. "Sure, whatever you want," Michael agreed with visible disinterest. As the first course arrived, an artistic arrangement of local vegetables with a vibrant green emulsion, I attempted to steer us toward anniversary sentimentality. "Can you believe it's been 5 years?" I asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Michael withdrew slightly, picking up his wine glass. "Time flies." His phone buzzed against the table. He glanced at it, then back at me with unconvincing apology. "I should check this. Might be important." This pattern continued through the second and third courses. My increasingly desperate attempts at connection met with monosyllabic responses or interruptions from his seemingly urgent messages. By the fourth course, we had lapsed into uncomfortable silence, broken only by the waiter's descriptions of each elaborate dish. After the waiter set down our main course and departed, Michael finally put his phone away and looked at me directly for the first time that evening. Something in his expression, a cold determination, a complete absence of warmth, sent a chill through me. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice even, almost rehearsed. I set down my fork, food forgotten. "What is it?" "Amber is pregnant." The words hung in the air between us, their meaning not immediately processing in my mind. "Michael's secretary is pregnant," I repeated stupidly, as if we were discussing a casual workplace announcement. "Yes, with my baby." The room seemed to tilt sideways. The conversations from nearby tables faded to a distant hum as blood rushed in my ears. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "What are you saying?" I whispered, though I understood perfectly. "Amber and I have been seeing each other for 7 months. He continued in that same detached tone. "It wasn't planned, but she's 3 months pregnant. We did a test to confirm it's mine." 7 months. While I had been trying to save our marriage, lose weight, be perfect for him, he had been building a life with someone else. While I had been grieving our lost babies, he had created one with another woman. "How could you?" I managed, tears blurring my vision. Michael's expression hardened. "It just happened, Jen. These things happen when people grow apart." "Things don't just happen, Michael. You made choices. Every day for 7 months you chose to lie to me." And he shrugged, taking a sip of his wine as if we were discussing something as mundane as a change in dinner plans. "I was going to wait until after our anniversary to tell you, but Amber thought you deserved to know sooner rather than later." "How considerate of Amber," I said, bitterness seeping into my voice. "Look, this doesn't have to be messy. I've already spoken with a lawyer. We can handle this civilly." The clinical way he discussed dismantling our 5-year marriage, on our anniversary no less, sparked a surge of anger through my shock. "Why now? Why tell me on our anniversary dinner?" A flash of something, perhaps genuine remorse, crossed his face before disappearing behind the mask of indifference. The timing isn't ideal, I admit, but Amber's starting to show, and people at the firm are talking. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the complete collapse of my world. The tears I had been holding back began to fall freely now, mascara undoubtedly tracking down my carefully made-up face. At least Amber could get pregnant, Michael added, cruelly twisting the knife. 3 months, and she's already giving me what you couldn't in 3 years. The words struck like a physical blow. What did you just say? I'm just stating facts, Jen. Maybe the problem was always with you. Maybe you're just barren. The word barren, with all its archaic cruelty, its reduction of my worth to my reproductive capacity, hung in the air between us. In that moment, something inside me shattered. Not just my heart, but the image I had maintained of our marriage, of Michael as the man I had loved, of the life we had built together. I had 2 miscarriages, I said, my voice barely audible. I lost our babies, and you're throwing that in my face. Were they even mine? He asked with casual cruelty. Maybe your body knew better. The waiter approached with our next course, faltering visibly when he noticed my tears. Is everything all right with the meal? Everything's fine, Michael answered smoothly. Just an emotional conversation. The waiter retreated hastily, leaving us in our bubble of destruction. Michael continued eating as if nothing was wrong, cutting his perfectly cooked steak into precise bites, while I sat frozen across from him. When are you moving out? He asked between mouthfuls. Moving out, I repeated, still struggling to keep up with how quickly my life was unraveling. The house is mostly in my name, he explained as if discussing a business transaction. My lawyer thinks it makes the most sense for me to keep it, especially with the baby coming. Amber and I will need the space. The casual way he discussed moving his pregnant mistress into the home we had renovated together, the plans they had clearly been making behind my back, finally penetrated my shock. How long have you been planning this? I asked. He checked his watch impatiently. Does it matter? The point is, we need to move forward, efficiently. I was thinking you could stay with your sister temporarily while you find a new place. You've discussed this with a lawyer, but not with me, your wife. You've planned where I'll live without even talking to me first. I'm being practical, Jen. The house is the biggest asset, and I can buy out your portion of the equity. It makes the most financial sense. I stared at this stranger across the table, this man wearing my husband's face but possessing none of his warmth, none of the love I thought we had shared. When did you become this person? I whispered. I've always been this person, he replied with chilling honesty. You just saw what you wanted to see. Something in his candid cruelty finally broke through my paralysis. I stood up abruptly, grabbing my purse. Where are you going? Michael asked, seeming genuinely surprised by my reaction. We haven't finished discussing the arrangements. I'm leaving, I stated simply. Enjoy your anniversary dinner, Michael. The reservation is under your name, so you can take care of the bill. I walked out of the restaurant with as much dignity as I could muster, ignoring the curious glances from other diners who had undoubtedly witnessed portions of our drama. Once outside, the cool evening air hit my tear-streaked face, and I gulped it desperately, feeling like I had been underwater for hours. I made it to my car before completely breaking down, sobs racking my body as I gripped the steering wheel. The emerald dress, my carefully styled hair, the anniversary dinner, all of it a pathetic attempt to save something that had apparently died long ago without my knowledge. When the crying subsided enough for me to drive safely, I headed instinctively to my sister Natalie's house across town. It was nearly 10 when I arrived. Mascara streaked down my face, still wearing the dress that now felt like a costume from someone else's life. Natalie opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a fierce hug without a word. Her husband, Tony, appeared in the hallway, behind her, concern etched on his face. "I'll make some tea," he said quietly, disappearing toward the kitchen. "What happened?" Natalie asked, guiding me to their living room couch. "Michael's been having an affair," I managed between renewed sobs. "With his secretary, she's pregnant." Natalie's expression shifted from concern to fury. "That absolute bastard." I recounted the dinner conversation in halting sentences, each revelation seeming more surreal as I spoke it aloud. The affair, the pregnancy, the casual cruelty of his comments about my miscarriages, his expectation that I would simply vacate our home so he could move in his new family. "You're staying here tonight," Natalie declared when I finished. "And as long as you need after that. Tony and I have the guest room all set up." "I don't want to impose," I protested weakly. "Family never imposes," she said firmly. "And family doesn't abandon each other when things get hard." The pointed contrast to Michael's behavior wasn't lost on me. As Tony returned with mugs of chamomile tea and Natalie found me comfortable clothes to change into, I felt the first tenuous thread of a safety net forming beneath me. My marriage was over, my future uncertain, but I wasn't completely alone. That night, curled under my sister's guest room comforter, I texted my principal requesting an emergency personal day, then turned off my phone completely. Whatever Michael had to say, whatever plans he had made for dividing our life could wait until morning. For now, I needed to grieve the death of my marriage and the future I had imagined. I returned home the next day, hoping to collect some essentials while Michael was at work. Instead, I found him in our bedroom methodically packing his designer suits into garment bags. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "I thought you'd be at school," he said. "I took a personal day." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, distant. "I thought you'd be at the office. Taking care of some things here first." He gestured to the half-empty closet. "I'm moving the essentials to Amber's place until we sort out the house situation." The casual way he referenced their arrangement, as if his infidelity were simply a logistical matter, reignited my anger from the previous night. "So you're not even pretending to feel guilty?" I asked. Michael sighed, setting down the suit he was folding. "What do you want me to say, Jen?" "That I'm sorry, fine. I'm sorry that this hurt you, but I'm not sorry about Amber or the baby." "How long have you been unhappy?" I asked, genuinely wanting to understand when our marriage had derailed so completely without my awareness. "Was it the fertility issues? Did that push you away?" He considered this, seemingly relieved, to discuss practicalities rather than emotions. "I don't know if unhappy is the right word. Restless, maybe. Constrained. The baby stuff didn't help. It became this all-consuming project for you. Everything was about temperatures and timing and treatments." "Because I wanted us to have a family," I protested. "Because I thought that's what we both wanted." "I thought I wanted that too," he admitted. "But the more it didn't happen, the more I realized maybe it wasn't meant to be. And then you kept pushing specialists and treatments and endless discussions about our journey. It was exhausting." "So you found someone who didn't exhaust you?" "Amber understands my priorities," he said simply. "She supports my career without making demands. She's not constantly disappointed in me. The assessment stung because it contained a grain of truth. I had been disappointed, not in who Michael was, but in his gradual withdrawal, his unwillingness to fully engage in our struggle to build a family. When did it start? I asked, needing to reconstruct the timeline of my marriage's demise. Does it matter? It matters to me. He shrugged. We started talking more after she joined the firm. Just friendly at first. Then she helped with that big class action case in January, working late nights. One thing led to another. January. 7 months ago. While I was still recovering emotionally from our second miscarriage, while I was attending support group meetings and trying to heal, he had been beginning an affair. Did you ever love me? The question escaped before I could stop it, revealing the insecurity beneath my anger. Michael paused, and for a moment I glimpsed something like regret in his eyes. Yes, I did love you, Janet. Did love you. When we got married, I thought we wanted the same things. But people change. No, I corrected him, finding strength in the clarity that was emerging from my shock. People don't just change. They make choices. You chose to have an affair instead of addressing problems in our marriage. You chose to lie instead of having difficult conversations. He resumed packing, effectively dismissing my perspective. My lawyer will be in touch about the house and other assets. I think we can handle this without dragging it out. As he spoke, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression softened in a way it hadn't for me in years. I need to take this, he said, stepping into the hallway. I could hear the warmth in his voice as he greeted Amber, the genuine pleasure that had been absent from his interactions with me for longer than I wanted to admit. In that moment, I realized that while the suddenness of our marriage's end had shocked me, the relationship itself had been dying by degrees for years. After Michael left with his essential belongings, I sat alone in our half-empty bedroom, trying to process the swift dismantling of my life. The house I had loved now felt tainted by betrayal, the carefully chosen furnishings and paint colors mocking the effort I had invested in creating a home. My phone, which I had finally turned back on, buzzed with a text from Michael. My lawyer will call you tomorrow. Her name is Julia Winters. No, I'm sorry. No acknowledgement of the pain he had caused, just business as usual. As predicted, Julia Winters called the next morning with a clinically efficient summary of Michael's proposed settlement. He would keep the house but buy out my portion of the equity. I would keep my retirement account and personal belongings. He would take responsibility for the joint credit card debt as a gesture of goodwill. What she didn't mention, what I discovered only after requesting financial records, was the extent of that debt. Michael had been living well beyond our means for the past year, charging expensive restaurants, hotel stays, and gifts that had clearly never been for me. The second mortgage on our house taken out without my knowledge, though requiring my signature, which I now suspected had been forged, had funded his increasingly lavish lifestyle with Amber. This is fraud, I told Natalie as we reviewed the documents spread across her dining room table. He took out loans in our joint names without my consent. You need your own lawyer, she insisted. Someone who will fight for what you deserve. Through a colleague at school, I found Catherine Morgan, a divorce attorney known for her tenacity. During our first meeting, she listened to my story with growing indignation. This is financial infidelity on top of actual infidelity, she declared, making notes as I outlined the hidden debts and unauthorized loans. And We're going to make sure the court sees exactly what kind of man your husband is." For the first time since Michael's devastating announcement, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not for reconciliation, but for justice, for emerging from this nightmare with my dignity and financial future intact. As Catherine began gathering evidence of Michael's deception, I faced the practical reality of rebuilding my life. The substantial buyout from the house equity would eventually provide a financial cushion, but the legal process would take months. In the meantime, I needed stability and a sense of purpose beyond my crumbling marriage. I returned to my classroom with renewed dedication, finding solace in my students' energy and creativity. The familiar routines of teaching, preparing lessons, guiding projects, celebrating small victories, provided structure when everything else felt chaotic. My principal, informed of my situation in the broadest terms, approved my request to use the art room after hours as a temporary studio. There, surrounded by the cheerful clutter of student work and art supplies, I began creating again. Not the joyful pieces I had once produced, but raw emotional works that channeled my grief and betrayal into something tangible. The canvases became larger, the colors darker, the brushstrokes more urgent as I processed my pain through art. One evening, as I was cleaning brushes after a particularly intense painting session, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Genevieve Parker?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Dr. Lauren Chen. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I wanted to check on you and see how you're doing." The unexpected concern from my former fertility specialist brought tears to my eyes. "I'm managing," I replied honestly. "Michael and I are getting divorced. He's having a baby with someone else." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "Dr. Chen, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here," she replied, her tone suddenly different. "Genevieve, I think we need to talk. Would you be able to come to my office tomorrow? There's something important I need to discuss with you." Her serious tone sent a chill through me. "Is something wrong? Did you find something in my medical records?" "I'd rather discuss this in person," she said carefully. "Can you come at 5? After my last patient." I agreed, mystified by the mysterious request, but too curious to refuse. Whatever Dr. Chen needed to tell me, it sounded significant enough to warrant privacy and care. As I hung up, I wondered what new complication could possibly arise in a life that already felt shattered beyond repair. Little did I know that her revelation would be the final piece in understanding the true extent of Michael's betrayal, and the catalyst for finding my voice at last. The following day moved at an excruciating pace. My usual joy in teaching was overshadowed by anxiety about Dr. Chen's mysterious request. By the time the final bell rang, I had cycled through dozens of worst-case scenarios, from undiscovered health conditions to legal issues with my medical records. Dr. Chen's office was quieter than usual for my 5 o'clock appointment, the waiting room empty of the hopeful couples and nervous mothers-to-be who typically filled the space. The receptionist, clearly staying late, smiled sympathetically as she ushered me directly into Dr. Chen's private office rather than an exam room. "Genevieve, thank you for coming," Chen said, rising from behind her desk. She looked different outside the clinical setting of exam rooms, more human somehow in her casual blazer, her white coat hanging on a hook by the door. Your call had me worried. I admitted taking the offered seat across from her. Dr. Chen's expression was grave as she sat down, folding her hands on the desk. What I'm about to tell you involves a serious ethical breach, but after much consideration, I believe you have the right to know. My heart pounded as she pulled a file folder from her desk drawer. 3 weeks ago, I received a request for medical records from a Dr. Robert Winslow. He's a urologist here in Portland. The request included a signed release from your husband, Michael Harrison. She opened the folder and turned a document toward me. There was Michael's signature authorizing the release of his medical records. I wouldn't normally think twice about such a request, Dr. Chen continued. Physicians share records all the time with patient consent, but something about the timing struck me as odd, especially since Michael had completed fertility testing with us. She hesitated, clearly weighing her next words carefully. When I reviewed the records being requested, I discovered something that concerned me deeply. Given what you've just told me about your situation, I felt a professional and moral obligation to inform you. What is it? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Dr. Chen took a deep breath. According to these records, Michael had a vasectomy 3 years ago, shortly after your first miscarriage. The words didn't make sense at first. My mind refused to process their meaning. A vasectomy, I repeated. That's not possible. We've been trying to have a baby. For 3 years, we've been trying. Dr. Chen slid another document across the desk. Medical records from Portland Urology Associates dated 3 years and 2 months prior. The patient name was clearly printed, Michael Andrew Harrison. The procedure vasectomy. Status completed successfully. I don't understand, I whispered, though the horrible truth was beginning to take shape in my mind. The timing aligned with what you had shared during your fertility consultations, Dr. Chen explained gently. You told me you had been trying to conceive for about 9 months when you first came to see me, which would have been approximately 3 months after this procedure. My hands trembled as I pushed the document away. Are you saying all this time he knew we couldn't conceive because he had made it impossible? She nodded gravely. A vasectomy is over 99% effective at preventing pregnancy. It would explain why we found no medical reason for your inability to conceive. There wasn't one, at least not on your end. But I got pregnant, I protested weakly. Twice. I had miscarriages. Vasectomies can fail, though it's extremely rare, Dr. Chen acknowledged. Or... She didn't need to complete the thought. The alternative explanation was too awful to contemplate, that my pregnancies had never been Michael's at all, that his cruel question at our anniversary dinner, were they even mine, had been deliberate gaslighting to cover his own deception. The timing of this records request is what concerned me, Dr. Chen continued. Dr. Winslow specializes in vasectomy reversals. Given what you've told me about your husband's current situation, I suspect he was seeking a reversal to support the narrative that his new partner's pregnancy is his. The room seemed to spin around me. 3 years of negative pregnancy tests, 3 years of temperature tracking and fertility supplements, 3 years of blaming my body, wondering what was wrong with me. All while Michael knew with absolute certainty that his vasectomy had made conception nearly impossible. Why would he do this? I asked more to myself than to Dr. Chen. Why not just tell me he didn't want children? I can't answer that, she replied softly, but I felt you deserved to know the truth, especially as you navigate your divorce. This information may be relevant to your legal proceedings. I sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the magnitude of Michael's betrayal. This wasn't just an affair or financial deception. This was years of elaborate lies, watching me suffer through fertility treatments and miscarriages, while knowing he had deliberately prevented the very outcome I was desperate to achieve. What do I do with this information? I asked, my voice hollow. That's entirely up to you, Dr. Chen said. I can provide copies of these records if you choose to use them in your divorce proceedings, or you can simply use this knowledge for your own closure. I looked at the damning documents spread before me, physical proof of the most profound deception I could imagine. In that moment, something crystallized within me. Not just anger or hurt, but a fierce determination that Michael would not continue to control the narrative of our marriage or my future. I'd like copies, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And I'd like to know if you'd be willing to provide a statement to my lawyer if needed. Dr. Chen nodded. Of course. While I took no joy in bringing this to your attention, I believe strongly in medical ethics and patient autonomy. You deserve to know the truth about your own reproductive journey. As she prepared copies of the relevant documents, I sat with the devastating revelation. Each failed pregnancy test, each tearful month, each medical procedure I had endured, all had been part of an elaborate charade orchestrated by the man who had vowed to love and honor me. I left Dr. Chen's office with a manila envelope containing proof of Michael's ultimate betrayal and a strange sense of clarity amidst my pain. The path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since our anniversary dinner, I felt something beyond grief and shock. I felt powerful. The following morning, I contacted Catherine Morgan and arranged an emergency meeting. When I spread the medical records across her desk, her professional composure momentarily slipped. This is extraordinary, she said, examining the documentation of Michael's vasectomy. In 20 years of family law, I've never seen deception quite this calculated. What does it mean for the divorce? I asked. Catherine's smile was sharp. It means your husband has severely underestimated both you and the court's view of marital misconduct. This changes everything. The 6 months following Dr. Chen's revelation were the most challenging and transformative of my life. With each passing day, I uncovered new layers of Michael's deception, and in the process discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. My initial shock and grief gradually transformed into a focused determination. The evidence of Michael's vasectomy became the centerpiece of a divorce strategy that Catherine Morgan crafted with surgical precision. When confronted with the medical records during a preliminary settlement conference, Michael's careful facade finally cracked. "You had no right to those records," he sputtered, face flushed with anger and embarrassment as his lawyer attempted to calm him. "That's a violation of my privacy." "What about my right to make informed decisions about my own body?" I countered, finding my voice steady despite the emotions churning within me. "What about the 3 years I spent blaming myself, taking hormones, undergoing invasive procedures, all while you knew it was physically impossible for us to conceive?" His lawyer, clearly blindsided by this revelation, requested a recess to confer with her client. When they returned, Michael's approach had shifted dramatically. The aggressive posturing gave way to a subdued demeanor as his lawyer proposed a substantially more generous settlement than their initial offer. "This doesn't erase what you did," I told him before leaving the conference room. "No amount of money compensates for the years of gaslighting and lies." Michael avoided my gaze. "I never meant to hurt you." He said the words hollow against the mountain of evidence to the contrary. "You watched me grieve 2 miscarriages knowing you'd had a vasectomy." I responded, my voice low but intense. "You let me believe something was wrong with my body while knowing exactly why we couldn't conceive. If that wasn't meant to hurt me, I can't imagine what would be." As the legal proceedings advanced, other aspects of my life began to shift as well. I moved from Natalie's guest room into a small but bright one-bedroom apartment near my school. The space was entirely mine. No trace of Michael or our shared history, just clean walls waiting for my own imprint. My art, which had initially served as an outlet for my grief and anger, began to evolve. The dark, chaotic canvases gave way to more structured pieces exploring the themes of deception, revelation, and rebirth. When my principal visited my after-hours studio and saw the new work, she suggested something I hadn't considered. "These are powerful, Genevieve," she said, studying a large canvas depicting a shattered mask revealing a luminous face beneath. "Have you thought about exhibiting them?" The idea seemed absurd at first. My art had always been a private pleasure, not something I considered sharing publicly, but her suggestion planted a seed that continued to grow as I created more pieces in the series. 3 months after moving into my new apartment, I hesitantly approached Marcus Gilbert, the owner of a small gallery in the Arts District, who had previously purchased supplies at the community center where I volunteered. "These are extraordinary," he said after reviewing my portfolio. "There's an authenticity to the emotion here that's rare. I'd like to feature them in our Emerging Artists Showcase next month." The validation of my artistic expression, work born from the darkest period of my life, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Michael's betrayal had threatened to destroy. I threw myself into completing the series, working late into the night after long days of teaching. My students noticed the change in me. "Ms. Parker, you seem different," Emma, a perceptive 16-year-old, observed one day as I demonstrated a new mixed media technique. "Different how?" I asked, curious about her perception. She considered this thoughtfully. "More alive, I guess, like you're actually enjoying things instead of just going through the motions." Her assessment startled me with its accuracy. I had been going through the motions, not just in my classroom, but in my marriage, accepting less than I deserved, making excuses for Michael's increasing distance, blaming myself for our inability to conceive. Sometimes difficult changes force us to grow. I told her the lesson extending beyond art techniques. And growth, even when painful, ultimately makes us stronger. As my exhibition opening approached, I received an unexpected email from Paul Jenkins, a single father whose twins were in my after-school art program. He had been unfailingly kind during my divorce, offering practical help with classroom projects when he sensed I was overwhelmed, and bringing coffee when he noticed my exhaustion. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," his message began, "but I'd like to attend your gallery opening if that's okay. Your dedication to art and teaching has inspired the twins, and I'd like to support your work." The invitation felt significant. My first step toward possibly opening my heart again after Michael's betrayal. I accepted with a mixture of nervousness and cautious anticipation. The night of the exhibition arrived with a surreal quality. Marcus had transformed the gallery space to showcase my 12-piece series, dramatically lit against dark walls. Unmasking a Journey Through Deception to Truth, read the exhibition title above the entrance. Friends from school members of my support group, Natalie and her family, and even some of my students and their parents filled the space. Paul arrived with a bouquet of sunflowers. Because they always face the light, he explained with a warm smile that reached his kind eyes. As I circulated through the crowd, explaining my artistic process and the emotions behind each piece, I felt a profound sense of reclamation. These canvases represented my pain, yes, but also my resilience and rebirth. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd thinned, I noticed a familiar figure examining my centerpiece, a large triptych depicting a woman emerging from a cracked chrysalis, her expression transforming from anguish to determination to serenity across the 3 panels. Dr. Chen. I greeted her, surprised and touched by her presence. I didn't know you were coming. She turned with a warm smile. I wouldn't have missed it. Your invitation meant a great deal to me. Your revelation changed everything, I told her. As painful as the truth was, it freed me from years of self-doubt and blame. That's why I became a doctor, she replied. Not just to treat physical conditions, but to help people live their truest lives. Speaking of which, she added, her expression growing more serious, have you given any thought to your own fertility future, now that you know there was never any issue with your reproductive health? The question caught me off guard. In the chaos of divorce proceedings and rebuilding my life, I hadn't allowed myself to consider the possibility that motherhood might still be an option for me. I haven't really thought that far ahead, I admitted. Everything has been so focused on getting through each day, each legal hurdle. When you're ready, Dr. Chen said gently, I'd be happy to discuss your options. 32 is still young Genevieve. Your path to motherhood may look different than you initially imagined, but it's far from closed. Her words planted a seed of hope I hadn't permitted myself to nurture. The possibility that Michael's betrayal hadn't permanently robbed me of the chance to become a mother someday, perhaps with a partner who truly valued honesty and shared dreams, or even on my own, when I was emotionally and financially stable. The final divorce decree arrived 6 months to the day after our disastrous anniversary dinner. The settlement, influenced heavily by the evidence of Michael's deception, provided me with financial security that would have seemed impossible in those first shocking days after his announcement. The same afternoon, I received an email from Catherine with a forwarded message from Michael's new attorney. Amber had given birth to a baby girl the previous week, a child that paternity testing had confirmed was not Michael's. His carefully constructed new life had apparently collapsed under the weight of mutual deceptions. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a profound gratitude that I had escaped a marriage built on such fundamental dishonesty. Whatever pain I had endured through our divorce paled in comparison to the lifetime of lies that would have been my future had I remained ignorant of Michael's true nature. On the evening after receiving the divorce decree, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the beginnings of new artwork, pieces exploring themes of possibility and renewal rather than betrayal and loss. Paul had invited me to dinner the following weekend, a proper date he'd specified with endearing nervousness, and I had surprised myself by accepting without hesitation. As I sketched preliminary ideas for a new series, I realized that the answer I had found during those dark months, the revelation that had changed everything, wasn't just the discovery of Michael's vasectomy. It was the discovery of my own resilience, my capacity to face devastating truths and emerge stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more hopeful than before. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning. In losing the false security of my marriage, I had found something infinitely more valuable: my voice, my worth, and the courage to demand truth in all my future relationships. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that pain can transform into strength. Remember, sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from lies and toward your own truth. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Your support means everything as I continue to build my new beginning.